Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. So as per suggestion of a very helpful comment, I decided to take a look at a tournament from Paradox Rift. And basically I wanted to take a look at the Deck Out Mondays, which was a 185 player event, so pretty big, took place last night. And I chose out this tournament, well, because there's just a lot of variety in it, and there's a lot of really cool ideas. Some ideas that I'm happy to say I also had, so I'm kind of glad that Entei and Valiant ended up being a deck. So yeah, a lot of interesting decks to take a look at. I will take a look at some of the top decks, but I'm also just going to be kind of skimming through the tournament, just seeing what people have been playing, because at the same time, I feel like a lot of other YouTubers are just going to focus on like the top 8 of these tournaments. And I think it's just a bit more interesting to see what everyone's playing really and not just focus on what's been winning. So yeah, that's just my thoughts personally. It will be a bit of a learning experience, not just for the viewer, but myself as well, because I haven't really been able to keep up with this format because I've not been able to get onto live. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a fun journey, but we'll start the video at least by looking at the top 3, and then we'll kind of move on from there. So in first place, we have a Mew Vmax deck, which just scroll down to get the full image in here, which isn't particularly exciting, to be honest. There's I don't think there's any new cards in here from the new set, Paradox Rift. However, what is interesting about Mew Vmax is I think so many people kind of wrote this deck off with the release of Charizard. Everyone was like, okay, Charizard's really popular now, so Mew Vmax kind of just dies a death. But unfortunately, that never really happens with Mew Vmax. It just never really goes away because it's just so fast and consistent. And I think a lot of people maybe knew this as well. It's just kind of like in the back of their mind because I think everyone knows how powerful this deck is. It's just a case of how much Charizard will there be in an event for it to, warrant seeing play enough. So it's a bit of a strange one to describe, but I think Mew VMAX isn't really going anywhere anytime soon unless there's like a massive influx of Charizard again. So yeah, for all the people who love Mew, this is obviously great news. It's proof that it can do well, and it is doing well. But obviously, for anyone who's like, oh, this deck is super boring to play against, or it's super boring to play, then, of course, this is going to be pretty uneventful. But, also just playing a very consistent, straightforward deck kind of makes a lot of sense, to be fair, to a tournament that's going to be predominantly made up of people wanting to experiment with newer decks. So you could argue that was a bit of a factor in playing its winning, but yeah, just kind of makes sense to me personally that this deck would be doing well, like Malouette can efficiently KO stuff like Iron Valiant. So yeah, just something to bear in mind as we move into the future. But then, no pun intended, obviously. Next up, though, is we have Gholdengo in second place, which is really cool to see. Wait, was Gholdengo second place? Yeah, Gholdengo was second place. I had to double check that because I was a bit surprised with this. But yeah, it's going to be a second place Gholdengo. I'll be trying this out when I can get back onto TCG Live. And Gholdengo is a bit of a funny one because I think some people think this card is worse than Chien-Pao, and then other people think it's better than Chien-Pao. I'm personally just flip-flopping between both sides as well. I'm just not sure where Gholdengo realistically sits in a tier list. But, playing stuff like Scizor makes a lot of sense. It's a really good single prizer. You do also have to be careful for stuff like Path to the Peak and, what's it called? The new Aegislash, which is kind of seeing a lot of play from what I can tell. What I can tell from some of the smaller events as well. So playing Scizor just makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm glad to see Scizor included. Manaphy, Raining Greninja all makes sense. There are some other interesting additions, like this player is choosing to play just 2 copies of the Supporter Worker, which is draw 3 cards, discard a stadium, and they're also only playing 3 stadiums. So they're not really that worried about Path to the Peak, but I personally would be a bit more scared. Also, Professor Tour's scenario is interesting because it's kind of like Worse Cheryl if you're just wanting to pick up Gholdengo, but yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one, to be honest, picking a Professor Tour's scenario. You could also use it to remove a Pokemon from play that you maybe had to start with and you don't want it to get donked. And this player is playing a larger split of the 70 HP Gimmighoul, so they're less likely to get donked by Iron Valiant, which makes a lot of sense. So yeah, interesting nonetheless. Also, some new additions include 3 copies of Earthen Vessel, as well as 1 copy of TM Evolution, which is nice to see. And they are playing 3 copies of Arven. Like, if you're playing high counts of Arven in these sorts of decks, I mean, you might as well just slot in like a TM Evolution. It just makes way too much sense. But yeah, very cool list overall, and I'm glad to see Gholdengo doing well, so we can just close them down quickly. Then we have Miraidon, which isn't playing anything particularly new, aside from, of course, the new Iron Hands. This player just slotting it in there. I'll be curious to see just how much of an impact it has made on the deck, or if it's not really something you'll be using very often, because it does take 4 energy. That is kind of steep, even when you have generators and Flappy. I know it can feel a lot of times like your opponent is always hitting generators, even if you don't, but yeah, I would still be a bit skeptical that you'll be able to get this off more than once a game. I mean, this deck isn't even playing Ordinary Rod, so there's no chance of actually getting Iron Hands off again, but yeah, interesting nonetheless. Also, Flying Pikachu's kind of interesting as well, actually. It's a free retreat pivot, but at the same time, Fly, I guess, could be used. Thundershock's alright, but yeah, it's an interesting list overall. It's basic. Well, it's not like massively interesting as far as Miraidon decks go, but you know, it is pretty much the same thing, and I'm just curious to see how much of a difference Iron Hands can actually make on the deck. But next up, I think we can kind of gloss over these Lost Zone decks, just because I know some people are probably interested in seeing Lost Zone still doing well. You know, it's been a bit of a contender for best deck in format, and so people probably, you know, rightfully want to know if it's still going to be doing well and if it gained any new additions. And it does look like this deck does have actually some pretty sizable additions, like the Jirachi for the mirror match, essentially. So it will prevent Sableye from placing damage counters on your stuff, which is kind of cool. This list is also playing 2 copies of Counter Capture, so essentially giving you an option to basically Gust and Colress Experiment in the same turn, which is obviously fantastic. This list is also playing TM Devolution, which is like, yeah, this is definitely the combo that I expected to be, you know, successful with Sableye. You just sprinkle 60 damage to, you know, like 2B Barrel or something, and then not even that, they are safe now because you can just de-evolve them and KO both B Barrel essentially. So yeah, it's pretty scary, and as long as you're taking multiple prizes, I think TM Devolution is definitely worth it. So yeah, pretty scary list overall. Next up is we have I think is this just the same list? Or yeah, I think this is, yeah, that was the same list. Never mind. Getting confused there unnecessarily. The next up is we have Lost Zone Teener, which is basically was considered to be BDF at one point, but I'm not sure if it still is. But you know, it's not really playing anything that new. The Gauna captures are new, of course, but aside from that, nothing else that's too crazy. I guess it does mean that you can counter capture then Roxanne as well in the same turn, which is very, very scary, of course, for some players. And this deck can play Roxanne because you just can find it so quickly with Chorus Experiment and Comfeast. So yeah, the list itself is nothing too crazy. I never like one-offs of Pokegear. I think it's just a bit weird, but yeah, that's just personal preference, of course, at the end of the day. But yeah, pretty straightforward list and nothing too crazy. Next up we see, though, is a huge menace, which is going to be Snorlax Stole. I will skip over the next Gholdengo list, by the way, and just move on to Roaring Moon, but I want to look at Snorlax Stole. I want to see what it's playing. So this player went 6-1-1, which is phenomenal. So assuming either one right out, or, you know, people concede it to them. But a very cool list, actually. It's playing a very thin line of Chandelure, which is a bit questionable, to be honest. I'm not sure how worth it this is. I mean, you can find the pieces with is playing Peonia? Yeah, it's playing Peonia, so you can find them. So it's a pretty interesting in that sense. I do like Chandelure, lots of Pokemon, so it's kind of cool to see this doing well. But yeah, the Mill 3 effect is obviously quite potent in certain situations. You just have to pull it off. Personally, I'm like not the biggest fan of Control, just because I can't really play that well. I don't hate it. I don't hate its existence, and I don't particularly hate playing against it most of the time. But it's just something that I'm yet to learn how to play. So I'm a bit sort of like indifferent, I guess, to its existence. But you know, I know a lot of other, you know, YouTubers and stuff are interested in Control, looking at U10 types. So yeah, we've got some cool supporters here. Erica's Invitation's nice to see. 4 Counter Catcher, of course, this was like the upgrade for the deck. But aside from that, I don't think there's anything else particularly spicy. I guess Tour Scenario makes sense to remove stuff like Rotom V from play, which is cool. And for Arvin, because, you know, have decent tool options. But yeah, pretty scary deck overall. I am just going to skip over the next Gholdengo list statue. I'll very quickly see if there's anything that unique, because I do want to basically just look at different decks for the day. I don't really want to stick with the same stuff. So yeah, more worker. Also playing Avery, so basically just a draw 3 split. Palpad, like to see Palpad. 2-2 line of Sizor. Nothing else too crazy. This was also playing Psychic Energy, which is a bit strange, but yeah, I don't see why you need Psychic Energy anymore. But we have in 8th place, we have a Roaring Moon deck, and then skip over more Lost Zone variants to an Arceus deck, I guess. And then we'll look at Iron Valiant. So Entei Iron Valiant's a pretty interesting one, at least. So yeah, next up though, we have a pretty interesting variant of Roaring Moon, it looks like. I don't think this is the free deck that they give you on the Battle Pass. It's sort of similar in a way, because I'm pretty sure they give you Darkrai's, but yeah, it is cool to see nonetheless, because there's obviously taking advantage of the fact that Darkrai has the Dark Pulse attack and can also use its V-Star power to retrieve stuff like Dark Patches and Cross Switchers, which is really cool, and even stuff like Earthen Vessel if you really need. So I can see this deck becoming really popular. Like it wouldn't surprise me if this deck is all over the ladder right now, but yeah, it's just a very cool and fun deck. I'm not sure where Roaring Moon actually stands in the game right now. I've kind of like not really been doing much analysis on the decks themselves, but yeah, Roaring Moon's a bit of an interesting one. Some people think it's really good. Like, what do you guys think about this card? Actually, I'm just not sure. I need to try it out for myself really to get more of an opinion on it. But it seems really good. But at the same time, I can see why some people would be a bit reserved. You know, this looks like it could brick up a bit. Also, playing 4 Crushing Hammer is interesting because like Crushing Hammer's just kind of faded out of competitive value really because there's just so many ways to ramp up energy. But seeing the fact that it's in this list is quite scary, to be honest. And if Crushing Hammer actually is viable again, then that is a bit worrisome for some decks. But yeah, cool to see nonetheless. But yeah, pretty cool list overall, and nice to see Darkrai finally getting some attention. Next up, though, is we have a Arceus deck. Unfortunately, I don't think this is playing. I'd hope this was playing like the new Armorage or something, but sadly, I don't think this is playing anything newish, really. Yeah, okay, there is a counter capture, which is nice, but yeah, Superior V-Star, so designed to counter Charizard EX, of course, but I don't think there was any Charizard EX that did that well in this event, as far as I can tell. Okay, so there was one in top 24, and then there was. Is there any more in the whole event? Okay, there's one in 52, one in 55, one in 65. Okay, so the Charizards didn't do that well in this event at all, but yeah, still kind of cool to see. So yeah, I kind of like this deck. It's fun, obviously. It's mainly for when Charizard really runs back into the game, because I think Charizard will come back into the game in a big way soon. But yeah, it's cool to see nonetheless, and pretty straightforward overall. Next up, though, is we have personally my favorite deck in the whole event, probably. I've been theorizing about how to make this work, and I'm glad that someone has gone and done it for me. But basically, there's going to be an Entei v Iron Valiant. So, very simple concept. All you're doing is basically just slapping a bunch of Iron Valiants onto the bench, and then switching between, Iron Valiants and Enteis in order to use Fleet Footed and Tachyon Bits. And then you can use Burning Rondo to swing for massive damage. And because there's lots of decks in Standard right now that rely on playing large amounts of bench Pokemon, then yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty cool deck overall. Is it going to be very competitive? Probably not. It's still NTV at the end of the day, but I still think it's really cool. So yeah, I'm glad to see this doing pretty well. Also playing Full Stadium because you kind of have to, right? Because of Path to the Peak. But yeah, still a pretty cool list, and I'll be excited to try this one out. But I think that's it for the most interesting decks. I guess we could see if there's going to be an interesting Chien-Pao deck. I'll just see if there's anything that different. Okay, so this one is playing Iron Hands at least. So that's kind of cool. So 1 copy of Iron Hands, 2 basic Lightning Energy. It's all right. I've seen some people say this is what like makes Chien-Pao really, really good, but I'm honestly not a huge fan of this idea. It just seems a little bit too inconsistent. I know you have decent ways of finding it through Earthen Vessel and Irida, or Irida, I guess, but yeah, it's interesting nonetheless. Have to give it a go, of course, to see it. Also, there's no Palkia in this deck, which is very suspicious. No Octobax either. I'm not sure about this list, to be honest, but it's cool. It's nice to see that people are at least experimenting, but I'm not sure how viable that would be long term. That's I guess we could look at Palkia Chien-Pao, and then I'm assuming Entei on Urshi is going to be the one that's playing Iron Valiant, I'd imagine. Is this playing Iron Valiant? No, it's not. Okay, so that's interesting. So no Iron Valiant. Is there anything new in this deck? Okay, so Technical Machine Devolution at the very least. So there is something new. There is something. I was getting a bit worried there. I was like, is this just a pretty standard list? But yeah. Is this list playing anything new? Earthen Vessel, I guess. Yeah, that's about it by the looks of things. It's a bit of a shame, but yeah. So yeah, I guess that it is proof though that there is a lot of new upgrades to decks, even if they don't look very, apparent at first, I guess. But still cool to see. There's also a Tricina list. I'm just gonna flick through these two. I probably won't do any more after this. I mean, there's a Tyranitar list, but it went 4-4-0, so I mean, I could have a look through. I mean, why not? Might as well. I think I'll call it a day after these three lists, but we'll see how the things go. So we've got a Charizard list. I think this is pretty bog standard. I did see some TMs there though in the deck list. So what are we cooking up here? So we've got two copies of TM Evolution. That makes sense. So this person is focusing more on Charmeleon. There's also like a really good Charmeleon coming out in Shiny Treasure, which is nice. So another upgrade. I'm interested to see if this is like way more consistent than the just the straightforward Turbo Rare Candy build, because this list is only playing one Rare Candy, which is a bit suspicious. Like, you are relying on, Arvin and Town Store to get your TM evolutions, but still a very cool strategy and nice to see a Charizard list at least experimenting a bit. Then we have a Tricina list. It's kind of hard to take this deck seriously. I know it's cool, right? But it's not amazing or anything. I mean, Radiant Eevee, for example, is kind of okay, but I mean, Elekid's actually a really cool idea because you're obviously shrinking your opponent's HP down to 30, so getting the snipe with Elekid also show off the full list. One copy of Devolution, one copy of Evolution is interesting, and then 3 Panic Masks so you can give your Pokemon immunity. It's just a lot better than the Ice Cream, sorry guys, but 2 stage 2s in a deck is very inconsistent, so yeah, it's cool to see this. I don't know how good this deck is really, but nice to see it being tried out and experimented with. Then we'll call it a day with this Tyranitar deck, just because I kind of feel a bit bad for Tyranitar. Garchomp just kind of outclasses it in every way, but still a cool deck nonetheless. Sadly, I don't think there's any new additions to this. Is there? Yeah. No, there's no new additions, sadly, but I'd hope there'd be one. Is that the only Iron Valiant? I think we should probably cover at least one Iron Valiant deck. But is there not one? Okay, that's interesting. So Iron Valiant didn't actually do very well at all in this event, looking at it. But yeah, we'll look at this Iron Valiant list. I'm just going to skip over Zoroark. I mean, it's Zoroark, guys, right? It's not. Okay, that's quite funny. We have to do that one. Oh, whoops. I did not mean to do that, but hopefully that doesn't mess up the recording. Okay, was this a cloth list? Nothing too crazy. I'm not seeing anything that imaginative, actually. And Iron Valiant. Okay, this is interesting. What was this? Iron Valiant with Jolteon Vmax? Okay, that's kind of cool. I've also got like a Basculin here. Okay, that's nice. It is fun. I do like the idea that because you're using Rapid Strike for Mediachan, you can also use Rapid Strike for Basculin. That's kind of a nice addition. Because, like, Jolteon's still only doing 100 damage. I do worry about Manaphy, though, of course. Like, this is supposed to be a turbo deck, Trekking Shoes, 2 Squawk abilities as well. Seems like a bit overkill, but, if you're relying on getting that turn 1 every game, you kind of can't afford one to be prized. So I guess it makes sense, but yeah, it is interesting nonetheless. Not sure how good Jolteon is realistically, though. Giving up 3 prize cards, Manaphy's everywhere, and then at that point you're only doing 100 damage. And there's also no Shell in this deck, so no tank ability, 1 Gust effect, aside from Escape Rope. Yeah, this list is a bit suspicious, but yeah, it's kind of cool. Also, I'm just going to go over that cloth deck again in case it doesn't load in the recording. Sometimes it can just be a bit weird with presentation and stuff, so yeah, we'll call it a day there. It was also Regigigas. Okay, there's a lot of interesting stuff in this event. It's like Hisuian Zoroark as well. I'll leave the link to the tournament down below. Also, I guess Garchomp being a 170 track record and also being like the only Garchomp in the whole event is a bit brutal, I think. Yeah, there's also a Xatu Iron Valiant deck down quite low, which I honestly think that Iron Valiant Xatu is going to be really, really good. So it goes to show I was very wrong about that. But what is going on here? Okay, so we'll just have a look at Cloth to call it a day because I think it's fun to end on a more funsy deck. So we've got Cloth, Brute Bonnet with Hisuian Electrode V. I'm personally not a huge fan of Hisuian Electrode. I don't think it complements the deck very well just because it gets KO'd so easily. But yeah, you've got some cool stuff in here like got Spicy Season Curry, so you have to use this if you want to swing with 200 damage for Electrode, but it is a very cool concept. I do like it a lot. Like you have the booster capsules, of course, to allow you to actually poison your Pokemon with Brute Bonnet, which is cool. You could also do some spicy things with Radiant Sneasler. And I guess at that point you are actually doing like, was it 230 or 220? So you can KO some relevant Pokemon actually, like Iron Valiant, Roaring Moon. So yeah, I guess it's actually pretty good. But at the same time, I'm a little bit more reserved about this deck. I think it looks fun, right? But at the end of the day, it is Cloth. It's also only playing 4 energy. I suppose, yeah, Electro attacks for free, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit suspicious, but could be fun. But either way, that's going to be my tournament review of Deck Out Mondays. This has been a very, like, a bit more of a casual video than maybe it should have been. Like, I could have done all of top 8 and stuff, but I just wanted to browse through things and just take a look at the format really and just see what's going on and what's happening really. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. Do you enjoy this sort of video? I'd happily do this again, I guess, for another tournament. But yes, it's been Emma Power, and thank you for watching.